Hey everybody, this is JDGaming back today with an upgrade to a very fun deck that I uploaded just a few months ago, and that's Aromage Synchros. So of course, Cosmic Blazar Dragon is finally out, and at the request and suggestion of one of my subscribers, and kind of just more research into the theme in general, I've been able to tweak the deck in various ways, improve some engines, expand on some others, add in some new cards, and overall it made this deck a lot more fun to play, so I definitely wanted to get this out to you guys before, of course, Link format comes out in just a month or so, and it changes the future of Synchro monsters as a whole. So definitely a fun thing while it lasts, so I wanted to go through some of the combos and such for that. If you want to just see the alphabetical profile, you can go ahead and click the timestamp either in the description or pinned in the comment section down below. Otherwise, sit back and we're going to go ahead and do a let's build type of deck profile here. So let's see how this deck came to be. This is the part where we would normally put together the deck's core, but because we're going to make a deck based on a theme Konami has created, I just want to spend a few minutes to go through what the Aromage cards do. If you've already seen what these guys do, you can click the second timestamp in the description or comment section, and that will take you over to the next segment of the video where we kind of build the deck, but who knows, maybe you'll learn something about the theme. Essentially, it comes down to the monsters having an aromatherapy theme. And in real life, that means you're gaining some sort of health benefit by taking in the plant essence, the smells, the aromas, the oils from the plants. And that's represented in this game by two things. If you gain life points, it's a boost in energy. You get some sort of trigger effect that lets you take advantage of the duel. And then if you have more life than your opponent, then you're healthier than them, and you have this kind of overall advantage of being healthy and having extra energy. So the first wave of Aromages came out in Clash of Rebellion, and it's these four non-tuners here. They all have one of each of those effects. A blanket continuous effect if you have more life, and a trigger effect if you gain life. Bergamot's your beater. 2400 attack becomes 3400 if you gain life, and it lets all of your plant monsters do piercing damage, so lots of damage to your opponent if you have more life than your opponent. Kananga, the life gain effect is you bounce your opponent's spell or trap back to their hand, so Solemn Strike can never stick around the full turn to get activated. You're able to interrupt a lot of once per turn, hard once per turn, field spells or continuous spells with that effect as well. So interesting type of tricky card here. But then the blanket effect is it softens all of your opponent's monsters by 500 attack and defense as long as you have more life. Jasmine is the all-star, as you can see from the secret rare status. Essentially, it's a 1900 defender, and she says, every time you gain life, you draw a card once per turn per copy. So if you have multiple Jasmines, you can easily draw 2 or 3 cards a turn. And that's quite easy to assemble multiple Jasmines because, 1, she does have that 1900 defense, and 2, her first ability, when you have more life than your opponent, lets you go and normal summon an additional plant except Jasmine. So think of like the Lone Fire Blossom and Plant Synchro engine. Those cards are all plants, so Jasmine can let you go and make those plays. You can use things like Soul Charge with Lone Fire Blossom to easily pull out multiple cards, easily fetch multiple copies of Jasmine with the deck's on-theme Humid Winds that we'll get to in just a bit. So very easy to fetch multiple copies of this card, and you usually will want to add this card because it's the all-star that really glues the deck together and opens up that Aromage Synchro theme. Finally, for main deck non-tuners, we have Rosemary, who has, again, 2 effects. 1800 attack level 4 makes her the solid main beater of the deck, and her abilities are pretty useful for that. The increase effect lets you shift battle positions of a monster on the field that's face up, and that's unfortunate because as a trigger effect, sometimes that means you have to change her battle position to a measly 700 defense. But it is pretty useful for shifting Jasmine to defense position where it has a stronger 1900, and you're also able to go and shift your opponent's monsters not only to soften them into defense position, but don't forget, as plant monsters, you can take advantage of Black Rose Dragon's second ability to do a lot of damage through your opponent's 0 attack points, thanks to that card's effect. So very tricky card there. And then the second continuous ability is essentially, if you have more life than your opponents, all of your plant monsters become Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon. So your opponent can't use any of their monster effects during the battle phase when your plants are attacking them. So very easy for you to get through your opponent's hand traps, their weird grave effects, anything that is supposed to replace the monster or otherwise make it difficult to kill. This card will hopefully get around. So it's a very fun type of a tricky, gimmicky effect, but I think it really does fit nicely into this for fun theme. It adds a lot of color to it. The next wave of monsters came out in Invasion Vengeance, and essentially it's our tuner and generic synchro. Angelica is an Aroma Seraphim monster, still an Aroma monster. It's a level 1 tuner, and it's very useful because it's a hand trap that can be used during either turn to gain life equal to the attack of any of your fallen Aroma monsters. A lot of times that's going to be your Bergamot for 24, your Rosemary for 2,000, or your Rosemary for 1,800 here. These are both Rosemaries, but Aroma Seraphim or Aromage Rosemary. But you can even gain, a modest 14 with Kananga. Even 100 off Jasmine will still let you trigger the effects that these guys have. And if you do gain a lot of life, then that helps you get more life than your opponent to activate and unlock these abilities here. So very useful card for that purpose. And her continuous type ability is if she's in the graveyard because you sent her there, and you have more life than your opponent because you sent her there and gained life, and you have an Aroma monster that you triggered using that Angelica, well, you get some more advantage because she comes back as a free level 1 tuner, although she does get banished afterwards, much like a Plague Spreader zombie. But as you may see from that card, there are a lot of ways to combo that banish aspect with a lot of cards in our extra deck, so we're going to keep an eye on that. This card is the only Aromage monster with a hard once per turn ability, so you can only use each effect of Aroma Seraphim Angelica once per turn. But, it's still a very potent card in being able to trigger all of your effects, so very useful, of course. And then our generic synchro here, it's a level 5. It's a plant. It starts off with 2,000 attack, but while your life is higher than your opponent's, all your plants, including yourself, gain 500 attack and defense. So that lets you become a 2,500 beater. And then if you gain life, her trigger effect is to blank any one card your opponent controls for the turn by ridding all of its effects. So the way chains work, if your opponent plays Raigeki and you gain life with Angelica, your Angelica lets you gain, but you don't immediately trigger this thing. It has to wait until the chain is done. So it's unfortunate. Raigeki will wipe out your board. But that is a bit fair, I think, that you can't just stop your opponent's normal spells. What this is useful, though, is if your opponent summons a monster with an ignition effect, something like Castel, they'll never be able to activate that effect because as soon as it hits the board, you can blank it. Or if they have something like Dragonic Diagram, a field or continuous spell that needs to stay on the board to activate, blank it before they can even do anything with it. So overall, it is a nice bit of control that this deck is able to gain, makes use of the extra life points, and the fact that you're gaining life points to give a little extra color to this deck as well. So those are our monsters. And finally, our spells and traps give a lot of support, and these are also hard once per turn cards. So you can only play one of those cards with that name per turn, or actually their effects. So we have Aroma Garden as our field spell. This is our main source of life point gain consistently. So once per turn, if you control an Aroma monster, you gain 500 life points, and that's your choice when you activate it. Also, all the monsters that were there to kind of smell that aroma there will gain 500 attack and defense, and that's every monster you control, not just Aroma monsters. So if you think about it, 500 attack on one monster, your Jasmine becomes 600, whoop-de-doo. Well, you still drew a card off Jasmine, but what if you have multiple monsters on the board, including non-Aroma monsters? Every single card gains 500 attack, so that's a huge amount of life points, or rather attack points you're gaining on your monsters. You're able to do a lot of extra damage to your opponent and either solidify your advantage over your opponent or potentially just end the game with how much extra attack you're gaining. And that lasts even if your opponent decides to MST or otherwise get rid of this Aroma Garden. So very cool effect. Once it's resolved, that attack boost will stay. And then it also works during your opponent's turn in a sense, because if you lose one of your monsters to battle or card effect and it gets destroyed and sent to the graveyard, Aroma Garden triggers and gains you 1,000 life, allowing you kind of like to rage kill your opponent by triggering all these guys in revenge if one of them dies. And 1,000 life is a decent amount. If you've been keeping your life points fairly high during the game, then that might be enough to keep you above or push you above the level where now you have more than your opponent and you unlock these abilities as well. So very useful card for that. And then our last two cards are Continuous Traps. Humid Winds and Dried Winds basically give a lot of support to this deck. Humid Winds is our main card because you pay 1,000 life to add any Aroma monster from your deck to your hand. So, free effect triggers with Angelica, or free draws with Jasmine, or, any of your other guys, just whatever fits the situation. And then if your life is lower than your opponent's, you gain 500 life points, and that lets you just trigger anything at any time. So the fact that it lets you actually turn your Aromage monsters into trap cards, in a sense, is what makes Humid Winds so valuable. And then Dried Winds allows you to take advantage of all the extra life points you're gaining, because you can go ahead and pop one of your opponent's face-up monsters anytime you gain life, so that's a good disruption effect. But then on top of that, if you have at least 3,000 more life than your opponent, you can pay life so that you go down to their level, and then you're able to destroy your opponent's monsters that have attack points that add up to equal to or less than the life you paid. So if you pay 3,000, you're equal to them in life now, and you can kill a Blue Eyes White Dragon, or multiple monsters whose attack add up to that level, so 3,000 or less. And as you may expect, if you have, let's say, 4,000 more life than your opponent, or more than that, you have to pay everything, which is unfortunate, and become equal. But you can kill more monsters potentially. Maybe wipe out your opponent's board, which is really good for crowd control and disrupting your opponent, but also lets you go and fight back with all your monsters and potentially push for a kill during that next turn. So that's why Dried Winds is good. It turns your life point advantage into tangible advantage. Now that we discussed what the cards do, I want to go through the main combo that really made me want to play this deck again. It needs a 3-card combo to actually get the board, but you'll find that this happens quite a lot when we build the deck the way we will, because there are a lot of substitutes for a couple of these cards, and Lone Fire Blossom's already at 3 as well. So you have 3, 3, and 3 of these, but then you can have even more because of the other cards that you could draw instead. Essentially, this combo starts off with Lone Fire Blossom. You tribute it, which lets you go and special summon your Aromage Jasmine from your deck. That lets you go and play Aroma Garden from your hand. You gain the 500 life, so you're at 85. You draw a card off of Aromage Jasmine. It doesn't matter what it is. But now you have more life than your opponent, so you can gain an additional plant normal summon that turn. So normal summon your level 1 tuner. It doesn't even have to be Angelica. It could be anything else. See where the substitutes come in. And with a level 1 and a level 2, you can go and Synchro summon up into Yugioh Defender, which lets you clone it into more Yugioh Defenders as long as you only have Earth Warrior Synchro monsters on the board. So in this case we do, so we can bring out our second copy. And right now we only need 2 here because we're going to overlay them for Melier of the Trees, who has 2 abilities. So you detach a material and you can choose between either Foolish Burial one of your plants to the grave, which is obviously good in this deck, or you can Monster Reborn one of your plant monsters in defense position. So I'm going to choose that Reborn ability, bring back the Lone Fire Blossom, and then by tributing Lone Fire again, I can go ahead and special summon Chidubime, Princess of Autumn Leaves, which has 2,800 defense points and draws all attacks designated at plant monsters to herself. So that becomes this giant wall. Your opponent can't touch Melier in battle. And if your opponent decides to kill this card in some other way, if it is destroyed by your opponent's card, you get to replace her with any other plant from your deck that's not Chidubime, which is really cool because then that might get you like a Dandelion for even more stalling, a combo piece, or just an enabler with something like Lone Fire Blossom directly from the deck. So the fact that this protects your Melier is really cool because now next turn you can get rid of this other copy, bring back the Lone Fire, and now you can sack the Melier, who's a plant monster, and get another guy and like start comboing off. And again, as you will see, the way we're going to construct this deck, we're going to see this combo much more than you would expect for a generic 3-card combo. So just based on this combo, we can see we're playing 3 copies of Aromage Jasmine, 3 copies of Angelica as our level 1 tuner monster, and then we're playing 3 copies of Aroma Garden. We can then enhance the consistency of this by playing 3 Terraforming, which, sometimes does seem like a lot, but in the context of this deck, you have to realize we're building an Aromage deck, so we're going to want to see Aroma Garden a lot anyway, and Terraforming lets us just thin our deck while getting extra copies. Cool thing is, Aroma Garden actually can be played more than once per turn. You can actually go ahead. I don't know if I said that this was a hard once per turn. I may have if you were seeing the instruction part, but essentially this card is not a once per turn, so you can gain 500 attack. You could play another copy instead of it, and then go gain another 500, and then gain another 500. So every copy of Terraforming essentially is live as long as you have copies of Aroma Garden. And in testing, I never really found any issue with having those Terraformings. That just makes your deck much more consistent. Lone Fire Blossom is really cool because, it not only serves as a combo piece, but it basically serves as either of these cards here, which is very nice. So, now you could see this is a wild card. You actually have 6 of each of these cards. And just to make things even better, because this is the plant synchro type of deck, we're going to go ahead and play 1 Glow Up Bulb and Spore. Recursive level 1 tuners, so now we have even more copies there. And then just to make the deck work, that main combo, we are playing the 1 Chirubime, 1 Melie, and 2 Goyo Defenders for now. We can do some more cool things to increase consistency as well. Classic one-ofs like Foolish Burial and 1-for-1 are really good for getting out our level 1 tuner monsters in this type of deck, and it works even better because it actually lets us go not only for the classic plant synchro plays, but also for that type of a combo. So we'll play more of these for the level 1s. Soul Charge lets us really take advantage of Lone Fire Blossom. That basic Quasar play. We can do that in this deck as well. So we'll play the 1 Soul Charge here. And as if that weren't enough, we could play Super Solar Nutrient, which I'm so glad is finally a super rare card. But essentially, it's a continuous spell. It says you could tribute a low-level plant that's level 2 or lower from your graveyard, or from your field, to special summon a plant from your deck whose level is total less than or equal to your tributed monster's level on the field plus 3. And what that means, I know in English they don't necessarily specify, well, when do you add the 3? Do you add it at the end? Do you add it before you tribute? Like, it's confusing. But the way the card works in OCG, basically the way it's ruled is whatever plant you had, let's say you start with Jasmine. You tribute her. She's a level 2, right? So you have 2 plus 3. You can go up to level 5 from your deck, is what that means. So that easily lets you go Lone Fire Blossom in this deck because you have, again, easy ways to bring out level 1 monsters, actual level 1 monsters, and even some level 2 monsters. So all these become targets that allow you to essentially, turn your cards into free Lone Fire Blossoms. And, oh, look at that. We just found 3 more cards that allow us to go and pull out not only pieces of our combo, but just more access to the plant engine in general. So very, very powerful way to add a lot of consistency to our deck. I'm actually going to add this to the Lone Fire Blossom side because it has that type of a wild card like power. And then to finish out the plant engine, we are playing the 1 Dandelion. This gets you free tokens. Those are good targets for Super Solar Nutrient. And as an earth monster, you can use this with Goyo Defender to make Melie. And then to not only abuse the Dandelion, but also Jasmine, who has less than 500 attack. We're going to play the Debris Dragons, which gives us access to level 7s, which are pretty cool in this deck, but also access to Coral Dragon as well. So that's really interesting because now we have, the Coral Dragon can be summoned off of Jasmine, lets you get rid of dead terraformings or whatever to just get rid of cards, and if you use it as a synchro material, you do get to draw, so, make extra use of random fluff tokens and stuff. But on top of that, we're able to go for our 2 main dragon synchro monsters. I already mentioned Black Rose briefly in that intro section, but essentially, this is a plant deck. You do have Black Rose's second ability that lets you go and slam your opponent for 2400 attack or whatever your strongest monster is, and that really does synergize very well with Aromage Rosemary being able to shift battle positions. And then Ancient Fairy Dragon is really cool because she actually gains you life points for popping your field spell that gains you life points. So as if gaining life once weren't enough, now you can gain again and again. The thing with Aroma Garden is you can use another copy and gain not only more life, but more attack points as well. So Fairy Dragon gives you a lot of attack power in this type of deck, which makes it very cool. If you bring out the Fairy Dragon first, have, let's say Angelica comes out. You gain the 500 attack, Fairy Dragon becomes 2600. You could pop it, gain 1000 life, bring out another Aroma Garden. As long as you still have an Aromage monster, you can go and Aroma Garden for another 500, and Fairy Dragon becomes a 3100 attacker. So, put that into perspective. What's usually seen as kind of like a mediocre card that, has some decent ability to get rid of your opponent's field spells is actually very powerful in your deck, regardless of whatever your opponent's playing. And of course, base 3000 defense is really good. The ability to special summon at the expense of your battle phase, goes in line with Soul Charge and really allowing you to go and make a big monster. So Very powerful card, and I think it's definitely worth running here as well. And now it's time to actually finally add these Aromages to the deck, you know, because it is an Aromage deck. Basically, this is a combo that I liked using in the previous build, and I still really do think it's a fun one that's worth showing off, you know, just for the fun of it. So we're going to start off with the same combo, you know, just Synchro Summon for 3, which is very easy to do because your Angelica comes back, you have other level 1 tuners, yada yada. You have a lot of ability to fetch these cards. When you Synchro for the 2 of these, you go for Tatsunoko, which is really cool, as this lets you go and Synchro using cards from your hand as a material, or at least one card from your hand. That means if you use Humid Winds, you know, this card's already good because it lets you go and put together your combos, but if you add a Bergamot to your hand, that's a level 6, which lets you go and Synchro with these for a level 9 Vermilion Dragon Mech. So this card was overlooked by many duelists because, you know, it's just not as good as Trishula, right? But in this deck, it's really good because you only need the 2 monsters to summon it. It's got 2700 and it's a level 9, and it says you can banish a plant, or excuse me, a tuner monster from your field, hand, or graveyard to target a card on the field and destroy it. So, oh, it's pretty good for removal, I guess. And then if this guy is destroyed by a card effect after it was Synchro Summoned and it's sent to the graveyard, you could target one of your banished tuners and add it to your hand. So that's really cool because if the Angelica didn't get banished already, you can banish her for the ability of Dragon Mech, pop a card, and then when this thing dies, you can add Angelica from the banish to your hand, and guess what? She's a hand trap. You could send her to the graveyard. You use Bergamot, which is the strongest Aromage monster you have in your deck, to Synchro Summon for this. Now you gain 2400 life, and then you can go and potentially bring that card back again as a tuner monster if your life points end up being higher. All because you're able to play on the simple synergy of summon a level 3 monster, Humid Winds gets you the Bergamot, which, you know, you're able to use Tatsunoko for. But the cool thing here, you know, this combo works nicely because Vermilion Dragon Mech is a thing that allows you to take advantage of Bergamot. But you have to understand that if you use Humid Winds, it gives you a lot of Synchro Summoning power in terms of whatever you want. Choose another Jasmine, you can go for a 5 like a TG Hyper Librarian. You know, choose a 6 like Kananga, you can go for a Coral Dragon. Choose a 4 like Rosemary, and you can go for one of our 7s that we talked about. So lots of different summoning options exist, all because of Humid Winds. So the way we're going to play these cards in terms of quantity, we're playing the 1 Tatsunoko and Vermilion Dragon Mech for the overall kind of just have one of each for your combos. Realistically, there just isn't enough room to have more than that, unfortunately. We will be playing the full set of Humid Winds because you do want to see this card for a lot of purposes, just overall keeping control of the field, searching more cards. And although you can't use more than one, I'd rather see at least the 1 than not at all. So that's why we're playing 3. I don't know. I didn't like this at less than 3. For the other monsters, we already talked about 3 Jasmines and 3 Angelicas, but we're playing 1 Kananga because, you know, that just gives you access to another level 3 Earth for Melee, lets you go for a Synchro from your hand with Humid Winds, and its ability's decent. You know, you won't always want to draw it, but it's decent. At the very least, you could summon him as an Aromage monster, and then he'll be able to let you use your Aroma Garden and all that other stuff. 1 Bergamot, because, you know, as powerful as this thing is, the fact that you're able to go and search it whenever you need means you don't have to worry about drawing a tribute monster. So that's really just why the 1 copy. And then double Rosemary, mainly because as good as this card is, it is kind of a gimmicky card, and I wouldn't always like to draw this card. So I just found, you know, 2 copies is good. Some people might want 3 because it is a pretty hefty amount of levels for your Synchro Summons with your, you know, low-level tuners. Some people might even want 1, but I think at that point, you know, like, are you really playing Aromages? That might be the question to ask. And then 1 Dried Winds. The reasoning here is it gives you a nice bit of control, but the problem is you don't want to draw multiples of this because it really does slow you down. It's not like Humid Winds where, you know, having that 1 copy or not having it makes the difference between victory and defeat because you can get set up or not. You know, Dried Winds is if you draw it, great. It's an amazing luxury. If you don't draw it, oh well, you still have other combo cards you've probably drawn into instead, and that will allow you to survive in the duel. And finally, after this long twisted, you know, combo this, combo that type of a build, we're finally finishing out the main and extra deck. So first off, I want to play a copy of Titanial in the main because sometimes the weird things happen, you draw your Chirubime, what are you going to do? Or your opponent summons Master Hero Darklaw, which, I love because I am a hero player, but at the same time, there are decks that just can't function with that card, and I don't like limiting creativity. So, this is your one card out if you draw Lone Fire Blossom. Just run over any problematic monster. And the fact that you're able to prevent targeting effects is quite nice because you have a lot of free fluff tokens, free monsters like Angelica. You're able to power up this card quite nicely. And even these days, we are very quick to say, oh, if you're targeting and destroying, it's not that good. But you'd be surprised at what free removal is really taken advantage of that targets and destroys, and Titaniel is able to stop those effects, so it's very powerful for that. Then, kind of to add on to the defensive power of our Dried Winds, I decided, we can take advantage of life points in other ways. So we are playing the full Solemn Brigade here. Yes, this makes you fall in life a little bit, but I think they are worth it in the long run because you're gaining life points. It lets you really turn the tangible life point gain into something that controls your opponent and keeps them in check so that they can't go off like crazy. So, let's say you have that Melie and Chirubime on the board. A single strike might be what you need to stop your opponent from breaking up that combo with something like a Castel. So, overall, I think the strikes and the warning work very nicely. Again, they will cause kind of weird situations where, oh no, my life is too low now. But I think this deck can really afford the extra life points that you're paying for those cards. They're just so powerful. And, you're not planning on winning every game with this deck as much as I would like to say otherwise. This is a for fun deck. So in that case, good amount of power gives you great bang for your life points, essentially, not for your buck in this case. Extra deck, now that we've hit 40 cards that are main, we're playing one Formula Synchron because you can't fit more than one in the extra. It's as simple as that. You really could play two. But most of the time when you summon this thing, you're summoning with a fluff token and one of your many level 1s, and then you're probably turning this with the other fluff token into either Tatsunoko or Goyo Defender. So, it's not bad, especially if you already have your Hyper Librarian out at level 5. That lets you go and do the classic plays there. We are playing a single Haster because level 4 is pretty important for being able to go and synchro climb through all the levels. I found a non-tuner to be the most useful, and I found Haster to be pretty nice for its higher attack than Armory Arm. The fact that it's just, overall, if you get this killed or synchro with it, you get to blank one of your opponent's monsters. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing, but feel free to experiment with this slot. You could use Armory Arm. You could use, Quandux, which is a level 4 tuner monster. Choice is really up to you. But I chose Haster because I just felt that was the most well-rounded choice there. We are playing on top of the Librarian, the Aromage Rosemary, Aroma Seraphy Rosemary, excuse me. Just one copy because a lot of the time you don't really need more than one. I played two in the past, but I just found it's there. It's nice as a backup, but the deck doesn't necessarily have to focus on this card, especially with your ability to bring back monsters from the graveyard with Melie and whatnot. You have a lot of access to this. You don't necessarily need to clog your extra with slots when we can barely afford to play the one Formula Synchron here. So that's some of it. We are playing the one level 8 Encyphering Lord Omega. This is really cool because this also lets you take your banished Angelicas, put them in your grave, so now you can go bring this out, and if you really wanted to, you could sync the two of these for the Vermilion mech, do a free pop or whatever, and then Omega, the main thing, Omega puts himself back in the extra, so he's really the only level 8 you need. Cool interactions with this deck, really fun card all around, and everyone knows how powerful this guy is, so definitely nice that it synergizes with this strategy, makes it better than just a one-trick pony here. And then we have Trishula to supplement that Vermilion mech, because as good as Vermilion mech is in this deck specifically, Trishula is very, very powerful, definitely worth playing. Very easy to bring out because of all the different levels and the fact that you're able to go and fetch whatever monster you need at any time with your Humid Winds. And then finally, we are playing the Mighty Cosmic Blazar Dragon. A lot of times you're bringing this out with the Soul Charge and Lone Fire Blossom. I know Soul Charge is limited, but there are weird situations where, you'll draw Lone Fire Blossom or whatever, and then you'll go for like a Glow Up Bulb, and then you have something like a Super Solar Nutrient, and that lets you bring out more monsters. And if you have like a Jasmine, you can go and draw and summon more cards. It's ridiculous. I honestly can't think of very specific combos that bring this card out. To be fair, I threw this card in just because I thought it'd be a lot of fun, and there are games that you definitely summon it, and it is a huge blast to play. Essentially, a lot of you guys may be more familiar with Quasar. It's very similar. Same summoning requirements. It has to be a tuner synchro monster and 2 or more non-tuner synchro monsters. Same attack and defense, 4,000 attack and defense, and it has 3 abilities. It pretty much mirrors shooting Quasar Dragon, because you can basically use this quick effect by banishing this until the end of the turn. It has 3 options. First, if your opponent activates a card or effect, you can negate it, and if you do, destroy that. Oh wait, that's the same thing as Quasar, but I'm giving up my monster, why would I do that? Well, one of the biggest problems with Quasar is if you use that ability, your opponent's pretty much baited your effect out, and they kill your Quasar, so now you have no monster anyway. Cosmic Blazar is like Stardust Dragon in that once it goes down, by protecting you from that effect, it itself is out of harm's way and is able to, come back the following turn. So that's also why you need things like the strikes and the warning, because you need to control your opponent so that you're able to survive while your Blazar is missing. It does have another effect, is if your opponent attacks you, you can actually negate the attack and end the entire battle phase, which is pretty neat. If you just have this defensively early on and you have like a lone fire or something on the board, you can actually just protect that for the turn. That can be a powerful play. Prevent your opponent from winning just by attacking you. And then the other ability, which is really nice, is if your opponent would summon a monster or monsters, you can negate that summon, and if you do, destroy them. So that's really cool because it does hit inherent summons from the extra deck like Synchro and Xyz. It stops entire pendulum summons as well. And of course, any just normal summon, flip summon, those types of things can be stopped as well. So the fact that it has all these negations, I think, makes it worth the banish effect. Makes me think more of, it's like the Red Nova Dragon type of thing, where it's able to like get rid of itself for the turn and do things. But I don't know. Overall, I think this is a very fun card. I personally have been liking this more than Quasar, because I feel like Quasar is, go for the one big attack, otherwise you kind of lose. This thing is a lot more survivable and a lot more useful in many situations, so that's why we're playing that in here. And just as a quick note regarding that, I know some people would tell me, why aren't you playing the 3rd Goyo Defender? That lets you go with your Tatsunoko and go Cosmic Blazar Dragon. The biggest issue I found is extra deck space, first of all. And whereas, in this video I kind of justified why you could play 2 Defenders, the third one you can only bring out if you, again, have Earth Warrior Synchros on your board, and that's it. So then at that point, you've already used your normal summon and an extra normal summon. You can't consistently bring out Tatsunoko to be able to go Cosmic Blazar, at least in the same turn. There might be some combo that I have not found yet or something, and if you notice it, definitely let me know in the comments, and I'll find some way to incorporate that extra Goyo Defender. But as of now, it's just impractical, I think, to use Goyo Defenders just to go for Cosmic Blazar Dragon, because unless you draw like specific cards, like I didn't experiment with Soul Charge that much because it's a one of, sure, with that you could probably go Blazar anyway, but 2 Defenders you can justify in general. The third one I think would be dead weight most of the time, and that's why I ultimately decided to go with 2. Just thought that would be pretty important because that's a thing people are gonna wonder about. If you watched the video in its entirety, thanks. Hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing the creation of this deck as much as I did putting it together. Let's go with the main deck first. So we have 1 Aromage Bergamot, 1 Kananga, triple Jasmine, double Rosemary, triple Angelica, a Chirubime, Princess of Autumn Leaves, Dandelion, double Debris Dragon, Glow Up Bulb, triple Lone Fire Blossom, Spore, and Titaniel, Princess of Camellias. Spells, we have triple Aroma Garden, 1 Foolish Burial, 1-for-1 Soul Charge, triple Super Solar Nutrient, and triple Terraforming. And then for traps, we have Dried Winds, triple Humid Winds, and the full Solemn Brigade, including the Solemn Warning, and that makes a 40-card main deck. Then for our extra, we have Formula Synchron at level 2, 2 Goyo Defenders and a Tatsunoko at level 3, Old Entity Haster at level 4, Aroma Seraphite Rosemary and TG Hyper Librarian at level 5, Coral Dragon at 6, Ancient Fairy Dragon, Black Rose Dragon at level 7, and then we have Omega at 8, Trishula and Vermilion Dragon Mech make up our 9s, and our level 12 is Cosmic Blazar Dragon, and of course we have our 1 Melier of the Trees for all of the crazy plant combos.
That's the end of the video. If you enjoyed, please like it so we can share it with as many other people who may enjoy it as well. If you want to see more of this series, you can click the annotation you see on the right, or if you just want to see the last video I did, click the annotation on the left. And if you really liked what you saw today, then I invite you to check out the channel icon in the middle to subscribe to JD Gaming for more weekly videos. Thanks guys, this is JD Gaming, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.